Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. So we are back with another episode of HBO's Chernobyl, and the last episode was a lot to digest. This is one of those series where you feel almost ill from watching it. Some of the decisions that are made. Yeah, it's interesting. I was having a discussion with one of the viewers after watching the episode, and we're just discussing some of the events that happened and that led up to the catastrophe that we witnessed. And it's interesting because the thing that made you feel most ill, at least for me personally, it wasn't so much, it wasn't the blood, it wasn't the men vomiting, um, it wasn't the chaos that slowly creeped in, as they realized what was happening. It was those men in the committee, right? The people, the group of men in the committee, and I say men because I had to go. I watched the scene several times, and I came to realization that there were no women in that room, and it sort of speak to the current climate of the world that we find ourselves in, and just how much that might have been a little bit better if not for male ego, right? And but yeah, I mean the group of men in the room just sitting there, that made me feel the most ill watching the show because these men were there deliberating um, basically the cost of human life and coming to the conclusion that it was more important for them to save face, right, and not make it appear as though to cover everything up because they were more concerned about most likely world views and how they would be seen if they mess things up. And obviously I mean some self-interest of course is probably somewhere in there. But yeah, that was the most disturbing part of it. Those men choosing to ignore facts and potentially sacrifice thousands of lives for their own greed, right? I mean, Dyatlov himself. I mean, some blame lies with him, and I know. I mean, Valerie said as much, in at the beginning of the episode, right? That although he was sentenced, and although he deserved far more than the 10 years that he got, um, that it wasn't completely up to him. There are other people in the background pulling the strings, right? And so for Dyatlov himself, for me looking at it and thinking about the events that led to it, I mean the two guys who went back down to the core to pump water, even though there was no core, I mean they said to each other that all right, one guy said we did nothing wrong, the other guy said but we did, which leads me to the conclusion that um, I mean the experiment that they were performing, Fomin who was in the room as well, it was his test, it was his experiment. And the impression I'm getting is that these two guys probably tweaked it somewhat. Maybe they felt they could achieve better results or something to that extent, and then everything just went wrong, right? So I don't believe the fault completely lies on Dyatlov, but at the same time, he had enough time and enough foresight to make certain decisions that would have minimized the damage, and he chose not to. And let's be real, right? Most people, most scientists, most people in the scientific community tend to have an ego, right? And I think that's what we saw on display there with Dyatlov, right? It was his scientific pride and um, not wanting to admit that he could possibly have been wrong. It may not have been his fault, but in acknowledging that this happened, he would have been acknowledging that this was my fault and that I was wrong. My calculations were wrong. Something that I did was wrong, and he refused to do that. And not just it wasn't just that he would be wrong. It was just that it would be that he was wrong, but he's also responsible for the death that would follow, and he just couldn't bring himself to admit that. But as I said, right, he's not completely at fault for, causality for what happened, but he's certainly responsible for the fallout to follow, because he had ample opportunity to actually step in, and I mean, they must have some. There must be some measure in place that, if this happens, we follow these procedures. And that's the next thing, because it appears as though they didn't have any contingencies in place for such a thing to happen. And considering how dangerous it's a nuclear facility, you would think that they would. But they didn't. They were obviously not prepared. Whether this was some cost-saving measure or they just didn't care. But they obviously weren't prepared for something like this to happen. And yeah, so I imagine now Dyatlov, he fainted, but we know that he survives through this ordeal, and God knows how, considering all the people who end up dying. But I mean, the firemen who went to the scene, I imagine they will die, but at the end of the day, I want to believe that what they did there, helped even the tiniest bit to save some lives, so their deaths weren't in vain. I want to believe that. I hope it is. I hope that is the case, right? And I imagine now we're going to be following Valery Legasov. Since he killed himself at the beginning, but I imagine we're going to be walking through and seeing things through his eyes as the remaining 4 episodes progress. All right, so yeah, I want to say I'm ready, but I'm not really ready. Yeah, it takes a toll on you to see. Yeah. All right, so let's check it out. What does they have a decimeter?
Leak?
You think it's a bomb?
Iodine 131. It's not military, it's uranium decay, U-235.
Reactor fuel.
Oh, it's fast.
Ignalina, maybe 240 kilometers away.
Get everyone started on an IV.
We don't have enough.
All the children, then.
But we don't have enough.
As many as you can. Where's the old man?
He set up a burn ward in 16.
Professor Legasov. Oh, no, not yet. They're finishing up some other business. It'll be a few more minutes. Can I get you some tea?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Would you care to read Deputy Chairman Shabina's report while you wait?
Oh, certainly, thank you.
It's calling him in to basically lie for them. Dangerous. We need to barge in there. Yeah.
All right, Professor, they're ready.
KGB First Deputy Chairman Sharkov assures me that we have successfully protected our security interests.
Good. Very good. Well, it seems like it's well in hand, so...
No.
Damn, that was tense.
Pardon me?
We can't adjourn.
This is Professor Legasov of the Kurchatov Institute. Professor, if you have any concerns, feel free to address them with me later. Of what importance that could be...
There's only one place in the entire facility where you will find graphite. Inside the core. If there's graphite on the ground outside, it means it wasn't a control system tank that exploded. It was the reactor core. It's open. An RBMK reactor uses uranium-235 as fuel. Every atom of U-235 is like a bullet, traveling at nearly the speed of light, penetrating everything in its path, woods, metal. Every gram of U-235 holds over 1 billion trillion of these bullets. That's in 1 gram. Now, Chernobyl holds over 3 million grams, and right now it is on fire. Winds will carry radioactive particles across the entire... That's 3 million, billion, trillion bullets in the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat. Most of these bullets will not stop firing.
Comrade Sherbina, I want you to go to Chernobyl. You take a look at the reactor, you personally, and you report directly back to me.
Wise decision, Comrade General Secretary.
And take Professor Legasov.
How does a nuclear reactor work?
What?
Simple
Sherbina.
question.
Hardly a simple answer.
Of course. You presume I'm too
Roger,
stupid
come
to
on.
understand.
Yeah, this one has an ego.
So I'll restate. If it works, or I'll have one of these soldiers throw you out of the helicopter.
Wow. They'd probably do it.
The nuclear...
I thought
The
you
nuclear
weren't
plant-
stupid, Sherbina.
we use something called fission. We take an unstable element like uranium-235, which has too many neutrons. A neutron is,
The bullet.
if we put enough uranium atoms close together, the bullets from one atom will eventually strike another atom. The force of this impact splits that atom apart, releasing a tremendous amount of energy. Fission.
And the graphite.
Yes.
Graphite.
The neutrons act.
Good. I know how a nuclear reactor works.
No, he doesn't want him to go with him.
No, I don't need you.
Yeah, Jesus.
Naturally, we regret the circumstances of your visit, but as you can see, we are making excellent progress in containing the damage. We have begun our own
What is the
inquiry
extent of the
into
damage
the
exactly?
cause of the accident, and I have a list of individuals who we believe are accountable.
Everyone except you guys. Jesus. These people. Come on, Sherbina.
Why did I see graphite on the roof? Graphite is only found in the core, where it's used as a neutron flux moderator. Correct?
Farmine, why did the Deputy Chairman see graphite?
Perhaps you saw burnt concrete.
Now, there you made a mistake. Because I may not know much about nuclear reactors. I know a lot about concrete.
No, Conrad, I assure you
I
that
understand.
We could cover one of our trucks with lead shielding. Mount the dosimeter on the front.
That works.
Have one of your men get as close to the fire as he can.
Send one of them
Given
to
every
do
bit
it.
of protection you have, but understand that even with lead shield...
It's not 3 round, Ken. It's 15,000.
Jesus.
Comrade Savina,
What does that number mean?
It means the core is open.
It means the fire we're watching with our own eyes is giving off nearly twice the radiation released by the bomb in Hiroshima.
And that's every single hour, hour after hour. 20 hours since they're dead.
And these guys wanted to cover it.
Please
up.
escort Comrades Bukhanov and Fomin to the local party headquarters. Thank you for your service.
Comrade.
Your excuse.
Dyatlov was in charge.
Pass in the blame.
Dyatlov!
Tell me how to put it out.
We'll use helicopters.
You are dealing with something that has never occurred on this planet before.
He doesn't have the answer.
Boron. Boron and sand. That'll create problems of its own, but I don't see any other way. Of course, it's going to take thousands of drops because you can't fly the helicopters directly over. Remind them about the perimeter.
I don't think he cares. His men seem to be dispensable.
They cannot fly directly over the fire. A minimum of a 10-meter perimeter.
10-meter perimeter. Lead 1, you are inside the perimeter. Did not copy. Signal's breaking up. Lead 1.
Yeah.
Copy.
He's done.
Lead 1, do you copy? Lead 1, come in. Lead 1.
He's done. He's done. It's interesting. Do they have some code how they talk to each other, how to communicate information?
Where are you going?
Chernobyl.
Something tells me I get the feeling something bad is going to happen to her because she's poking in and they don't want the public to know.
Работников, которые остаются на месте для обеспечения нормального функционирования города. Все жилые дома на период эвакуации будут охраняться.
I know that your reactor core is exposed. I know the graphite's on fire, the fuel is melting, and you're dropping sand and boron on it, which you probably thought was smart, but you've made a mistake. Olana Yurevnio Khomyuk, chief physicist, Belarusian Institute for Nuclear Energy. And you're smothering the core will put the fire out, but the temperature will eventually increase, it will melt down.
I'm perfectly aware. But I estimate at least a month before it melts through the lower concrete pad, which gives us time.
No, you don't have a month, you have approximately 2 days. Yes.
2 days?
The fuel would take a month to reach the concrete. Each of these points, here, here, and here, all drain to the bubbler pools. I'm guessing that every pipe in the building ruptured, and then there are those fire engines that I saw on the way in.
Fire hoses are still connected. They've been gushing water into the structure this whole time.
They made it
Tanks
worse.
are full.
God damn it.
Tanks.
Our power comes from the perception of our power. Do you understand the damage this has done?
It's no
Do you
one in this
understand
room's
what's at stake?
responsibility, though, is it?
Boris?
Before you wanted
There
him
is
to
some
shut
good
up.
news. The airdrops are working to douse the fire. There's been a reduction in radionuclide emissions, but the fire will not be extinguished for at least another 2 weeks. Nuclear fuel doesn't turn cold simply because it is not on fire. In fact, the temperature will likely rise as a result of the blanket of sand we dropped. The uranium will melt the sand, creating a kind of lava.
Well, they slowed it down.
I anticipated this.
Except
I believe there was time to reinforce this lower concrete pad before the lava reached the earth and contaminated the groundwater, but as it turned out, I was worried about the wrong thing. This is Ulana Khomyuk of the Belarusian Institute. Thanks to her insight, we are now aware that the tanks are, in fact, full.
Of water. Yeah. Why is that a problem, Professor?
When the lava enters these tanks, it will instantly superheat and vaporize approximately 7,000 cubic meters of water, causing a significant thermal explosion.
How significant?
We estimate between 2 and... Everything within a 30-kilometer radius will be completely destroyed, including the 3 remaining reactors at Chernobyl.
Yeah, sure.
The entirety of the radioactive material in all of the cores will be ejected at force and dispersed by a massive shockwave, which will extend approximately 200 kilometers. The release of radiation will be severe and will
This dude
impact
is like,
all
what
of
the
Soviet
hell?
Ukraine, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarusia, as well as Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, and most of East Germany.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
You need her to
For
break
much
that
of the
down.
area, a nearly permanent disruption of the food and water supply. Steep increase in the rates of cancer and birth defects. I don't know how many deaths there will be, but many.
For Belarusia and the Ukraine, impact means completely uninhabitable for adults. So we need to
someone
find
has to go
3
there.
plant workers who know the facility well enough to enter the basement here,
And
find
die.
their way through all these ductways, get to the sluice gate valve here, and give us the access we need to pump out the tanks. Of course, we will need your permission.
My permission for what?
Send someone to
The
die.
war-
Comrade Legasov. All victories inevitably come at a cost.
Okay. I can't say I'm surprised at that response.
And open the sluice gate valve here. The valve will be difficult to operate, so we'll need 3 men. We'll need to know the basement layout. And of course, any volunteers will be rewarded.
What good is
A yearly stipend
reward
of
when you're dead?
400 rubles.
Do you even know how contaminated it is?
Men aren't idiots.
I don't have an exact number.
You don't need an exact number to know if it will kill us. But you can't even tell us that. Why should we do this? For what, 400 rubles?
You'll do it because nobody else can. But if you don't, millions will die. But if you tell me that's not enough, I won't believe you.
I'll just have
This
you
is what
killed.
has always set our people apart. I spit on the people who did this. And I caused the price I have to pay. I'm making my peace with it. Now you make yours. Go into that water. Because it must be done.
I mean, to save their friends and families, yeah. I mean, you be dead anyway if you do nothing and you stay and you do nothing.
Where's Parlov?
Brave men, man.
Baranov.
And again, this is all. I don't know. This is partly Detlef's fault because he had them pumping water into the core that wasn't there, which made the situation worse here now. So, Legasov would have had the 2 weeks he needed to kind of. Come on, guys. Come on. Alright, so there we have it, episode 2, Chernobyl. This episode kind of ramped things up like by 100, right? Last episode was more so of a precursor to the events to come, and we got a glimpse of what was going to be, what would happen. But this episode, we see the fallout of the events, the explosion, the explosion, the core exploding, the firefighters, at the hospital because they spent the whole night there putting that fire out. So I mean, they were right there touching the graphite on the grounds. They were there for the entire night. So that's they're gone, right? And I mentioned it before that I mean, I can only hope that what they did in some small way may have mitigated the level of threat that they now have to deal with. I hope. I mean, we're following Legasov now. He finally got called in, and he immediately, and I said he read the report before even joining the board, the committee meeting, and from what he read, he immediately determined that, okay, something is wrong. Oh, and this is where I thought not Legasov, Dyatlov, right? Because he was there. Valerie wasn't there. He just read a report. Dyatlov was there, seeing the things happen in person. And despite being told the core exploded, there's graphite on the ground, he absolutely refused to believe it. And then he made things worse but by having them pump water into the non-existent core. And I mean, Legasov and Sherbina, I mean, they're dead. I mean, Legasov said they'll be dead within 5 years. I don't know what's the time span between where we are now and to Valerie killing himself. But they've been exposed. So I imagine at some point later on they'll succumb to the illness. But I don't know. If I got that call, I cannot say without a doubt that I would have gone, or that immediately after reading that report I wouldn't have hightailed it out of there and left. On the other hand, they would have probably found him, as we've noticed here. I mean, it's not the U.S., it's not a democratic state, so they don't have much of a choice, right? It's just baffling that they're operating a nuclear reactor, and they're investigating the incident that happened, but they didn't have someone there, or they invited someone there, but they weren't willing to hear his opinion on the events that happened. So what was the point of bringing him in? I guess for PR, right? So he can answer the questions if asked. But and I guess, I mean, I have to give Sherbina some respect here, because when he first showed up, of course, he was a complete ass. But later on, when they met with Fomin and that other clown whose name I can't remember, and they were, I don't know, they were so determined to not admit the truth. Despite, if it is, because Fomin himself is a physicist, so he knows if the threat is as real as they've been told, he knows that they're all dead, and this could affect neighboring countries, right? But they both stood there and tried to make Legasov look incompetent, and so I have to give Sherbina some credit here, because it's as they said, he's a bureaucrat. He's a soldier through and through. He knows how to follow orders, give orders. So initially, he kind of butt heads with Valerie before, and I guess he has a chip on his shoulder in that way, that he came up through the military. He probably came up from humble beginnings and not being the smartest guy in the room, so he didn't take lightly to having his command questioned by Valerie and stuff like that. But I'm glad to see that eventually, because it's obvious, he cares, despite whatever his feelings might be towards scientists and Legasov, but he obviously cares about his country, at least, and his countrymen. The other bureaucrats above him can't say that they do, but initially they refused to even consider an evacuation, and the only reason they considered it is because the U.S. Took satellite photos of the reactor itself, and other neighboring countries now know the truth, so it forced their hand. I don't know if this is an accurate depiction of what actually happened, and hopefully, not some propaganda thing where they're trying to paint the US in a positive light. But if it is true, and once the series is over, I'll have to educate myself on this. I haven't. I was going to after the first episode, but I stopped because I didn't want to spoil what I might learn here. But I'm definitely, I'm told that there is a documentary of sorts. So I'll definitely want to check that out after watching the miniseries, and do some research on my own. But if that is true, I mean, they absolutely had no intention of evacuating the people. So they would have quarantined everyone within the city limits and had them die. That's just cruel. It's cruel. Jesus. But I mean, Shabina pulled a fast one on them, you know, talked up his newfound knowledge of how nuclear reactors operate, and it was a funny moment there with him and between him and Valerie in the helicopter. And luckily that one soldier is the MVP of this entire series so far. He's the one guy who has questioned his orders. That I don't know. Last episode, these guys are just following Dyatlov's orders to their own detriment. This guy, he questioned it. You know, he was going to fly over the reactor, but I said, hey, it wasn't the last minute, but you know, he listened to Valerie and turned the plane, the chopper around. So the important thing is that now the truth is out. It's undeniable. It's on the news, well, partially, because I noticed that the news left some important details out in terms of the gravity of the situation, right? I don't know. Because I don't think they've got an accurate reading from the dosimeter, right? Short of the 2000 Röntgen that reading that they got last episode. Well, they mounted a dosimeter on the truck earlier on and drove around the reactor, and how much was it? 16,000 Röntgen, I think. And I have to admit, the explanation of how nuclear fission works is very enlightening. You know, I mean, in passing, I probably would have read up on stuff like that before, but I've never had it explained in detail before, in a simple way, and I thought it was really well done in, you know, for the average audience member to easily understand what exactly that means, right? Millions of tiny bullets passing through you, and it's scary. It's scary. And of course, I absolutely have to talk about the female physicist, Ulana Komyuk. I'm probably butchering her last name, but she did a fantastic job here. That woman is motivated, right? Knocking down doors. If she didn't get through with the magistrate, she moved on, willing to even get arrested to make her point, right? And I mean, she finally got there. She knew about this earlier on, right? She detected it, and she could have chosen to save herself, which many of us would not blame her for doing that. But she chose to stay, put herself at risk to warn the public and warn whoever would actually listen, because not a lot of people would actually listen. But luckily she got there in time to fill in some of the blanks that Legasov was actually missing, not knowing that the water had been pumped into, or attempted to pump water. They attempted to pump water into the core before, which would worsen the situation, and he wouldn't, instead of 2 weeks, which he figured he only had between 48 and 72 hours before a meltdown. So glad that she came in. She saved him, at least. I mean, he didn't mention her. In the beginning of the first episode, she wasn't mentioned. So I wonder if she actually survives this, or considering how it appeared in the very first episode, as though he was being monitored, or they were trying to silence people. I wonder if maybe she ended up being a casualty of that. But I would hate to see that happen. The last three guys now at the end though, I don't know. How do you tell three men to to march to their deaths? I mean, Sherbina, he made a valid argument, I suppose, for your fellow countrymen, to save millions. I don't know. Maybe I listen. Out of us, myself included, would be tempted to make the selfish choice, like many of the other guys there did, and declined that offer. Especially not for 400 rubles. I said it before. I mean, come on. You're asking them to give their lives, literally. And you're only paying 400 rubles. I don't know how much that converts to US, but it doesn't sound like nearly enough. There aren't nearly enough zeros there. But I mean, I'm glad they did it. Whether or not it's actually of any benefit, given what happened there, I don't know. The lights went out. It appears as though the situation was much worse than they anticipated. The dosimeter was going crazy, and I don't think the reading should be that high, not in the water. So I don't know. It doesn't appear as though they are going to make it, but I imagine they averted the meltdown somehow. So I don't know, throw more men at it or whatever. I don't know what happens, but they went out like heroes, right? They made a selfless choice, and it's not an easy thing to do. Deciding, to give up your life to save people that you do not know. I understand saving your friends and your family, but for the most part, it's millions of people that these guys don't know. But yeah, I'm sure they appreciated the sacrifice, though. That was hard. Alright guys, be sure to post down below, let me know what your thoughts are on this episode, and I'll catch you guys for the next one.